Despite being out for over a year, I'm always left wondering about the logistics of Scaramouche's erasure and what's the possibility that Fatui actually remember him. So today, I want to explore the question. What is a way that the Harbingers can use to cheat the Irminsul? And is there a possibility that at least one of the Harbingers, and the ones at the very top, actually remember who the Balladeer is? Disclaimer, this is all just a theory and speculation and nothing is indicative of the final product. Also, this is less of a narrative theory and more like a what if they did this kind of theory. So brace yourself, it can get a little wild. So let's begin. In 3.3, we witness the erasure of Scaramouche from people's memories as he finds out about the truth of the Tatarasuna incident. As he realizes that the downfall of his comrades were because of the Taurus manipulations, and even more so that his friend was murdered by the Harbinger rather than fleeing from punishment. Jaded by the discovery that the betrayal which caused centuries of resentment was directed at the wrong people, Scaramouche attempts to right his wrongs by deleting the existence of Kabukimono and the Balladeer forever. He believed that those who died in Tatarasuna deserved a better chance at life, and that if he had never existed to do those wrongs, those people would have been saved. So as a final attempt to rewrite history, he erases himself from the Irminsul. However, he was wrong in thinking that the Irminsul can change the course of history, rather than simply people's memory of it. Which brings us to the most important question of how does Irminsul removal work, and is it end-all be-all? The removal of a person from the Irminsul involves collective deletion from people's memories and the rewriting or erasure of materials that have directly mentioned them or have been written in direct reference to them. It also involves the recreation of completely fabricated events to compensate for the removal of the individual. One clear example of this is with the letter from Kaedehara Yoshinori that was given to us from the Hues of the Violet Garden quest, where instead of talking about how Kabukimono wounded them, instead it was a madman who was caught in a frenzy and was slain. This man was notably human and was a samurai, which means that the Irminsul is able to completely create phantom people that can connect the logic of everything together. But the real question is, does the Fatui know? And if they do, who remembers and how would they? The clear answer to this is that Child doesn't know. He doesn't remember, as evidenced by the deletion of his voice line about the Balladeer, and he's most likely not privy to that kind of confidential information given his much lower prestige across the Harbingers. So I would guess that if the Fatui would remember, this is highly classified amongst those with authority. Which leads me to Tutore, because I believe that if someone remembers Scaramouche, or at least is aware of his existence, it would be the one who experimented on him. Tutore could have been smart enough to have a contingency plan that records the existence of all of the Harbingers in one way or another, with all of the Fatui's knowledge about fates, Khanria, and even the simple manipulations of a person's perception and psyche. It's possible that Tutore would actually have a record somewhere of Scaramouche that wouldn't have been removed, and from what we know, this could possibly be done in several ways. First is a cipher that's been written down, similar to Nahida's storytelling where she uses allegories and symbolisms to capture the situation of Tatarasuna. A more scientific method could have been the retranslation of Scaramouche's name to avoid detection from the Irminsul. For example, translating Scaramouche's name to a form of binary or symbols that have a separate deciphering sheet could bypass the Irminsul erasure with enough manipulation. This has actually already been used in the story with the removal of the Greater Lord. One piece of information still exists in the world that references her. In the Eternal Oasis, we see a chair that references the Greater Lord by engraving her incomplete name into a chair with different kinds of symbols. While this could be an external effect of the Oasis itself, I do think that replicating this is possible with the current technology the Fatui have. Another method is a general description without name dropping. It is generally unclear how the Irminsul quote-unquote detects the existence of written literature and to what extent a piece of content has to directly reference the person erased to be considered eligible for deletion. For example, if I were to say, his hat is big, does it get erased because his is technically a reference to Scaramouche? And we also can't really know to what extent does the erasure delete the branches of knowledge to ensure the person never gets referenced. For example, if we say that his hair is purple, we can't just delete the entire concept of purple to keep Scaramouche hidden. So one bypass that I was thinking is instead of describing what he is, one could attempt to describe what he is not. And it all boils down to the fact that the 6 Fatui harbinger position still exists. Think about it like this. The Irminsul could have erased the existence of a vacant seat if it so wanted to from people's perceptions, because it would have been much easier to make Sandrone and everyone else remember that she was the 6th, than adjust all of the numbers by 1. But because Irminsul can't change reality, then it can't touch the fact that the 6th position of the harbinger exists and that it's vacant. So my theory is that if texts describe the harbinger's position would not be erased by the Irminsul. For example, if I were to say that the 6th harbinger is responsible for doing tax collection, there's a chance it might not be erased because I'm not talking about the balladeer himself, but something more general. Another method that I'm thinking of is through negation. If you're familiar with the phrase SCP-055 is not a sphere, then you'll be familiar with the method of recording something forgettable by recording what it is not. So visualize this. This is scaramouche. Bye-bye, so sad. But this is what scaramouche isn't. So if we start describing what scaramouche isn't, then we can slowly try to piece at least an abstract image of what scaramouche is by deduction. We know that the position of the 6th Fatui harbinger generally still exists, so a sentence like this might bypass the deletion. The 6th Fatui harbinger is not tall. The 6th Fatui harbinger is not a pyro user. The 6th Fatui harbinger does not have long hair. Something like that. By doing so, the 6th harbinger could be slowly molded into a general idea that, though incomplete, is visualizable. However, the caveat of this technique is if the Irminsul just removes anything that was said, thought, or created in context to Scaramouche, directly or indirectly. So it's very possible that if this phrase, "the sky was red that day," was said while thinking about Scaramouche was deleted, then this method is null and void. Another possibility is that there could be a descender amongst the Fatui or someone with access to external information. A less likely theory is that there is someone in the Harbingers that actually directly remembers Scaramouche through divine or otherworldly origins. The legitimacy of this is unknown, but not impossible. We don't know the origins of the majority of characters yet, so it's not impossible to rule it out. This was also the case with Alice. The Fatui only have 4 recorded descenders, but that doesn't include anomalies like Alice that mysteriously know about the Wanderer's true origins, as evidenced by her narrating his character miscellany. It's not impossible that the Fatui have connections with otherworldly creatures. The last bypass that I'm thinking of is looking at the items that the balladeer had. Objects in concrete places cannot be manipulated by the Irminsul. It's just that now, in the new rewritten history, each item that would have belonged to Scaramouche would have been remembered as belonging to someone else, or nothing at all. But it's possible that if someone somehow got an inkling that all of these belong to one person, they can discern a brief description about Scaramouche. For example, if Vittori were to realize that he had materials that worked on an artificial human or an inorganic life at some point in his career, then maybe you can deduce that the 6th Fatui harbinger is not human. But simplifying that a little bit more, it can also work if Scaramouche just has a dedicated room. While we don't know what's in there, someone that could see his possessions or even clothes could deduce that this person has a liking for purple, he has a liking for large hats, and that he was Inazuman based on his stylistic choices. And if he had a Fatui harbinger cloak, that this room belonged to the missing harbinger. As far as we are aware, harbinger cloaks have a clear distinction based on the small crystal on their cloak. Scaramouche's would have had a different shade of purple that was distinguishable from Pantalones, similar to how Arlecchino's shade of red is different from Tartalia's. Now, while that is being said and done, what now? The implications of the Fatui knowing that Scaramouche exists isn't actually as damning to Wander as initially thought because of several reasons. The Hida explicitly says that after the battle and Scaramouche's loss, he's been discarded, as the Doctor has no intention of welcoming a loser. Her words, not mine. But Scaramouche reinforces that idea by blankly stating that his relationship with the Harbingers have always been transactional. However, if the Fatui were to rediscover the existence of Wanderer as Scaramouche, I do think that they will reevaluate their search for him, not only because of the sudden realization that the 6th Fatui harbinger is real, but also because Scaramouche's position is compromising. On one hand, if they can somehow control him to rejoin, he would have more information to give that would be valuable to the Fatui. especially now with his exposure to the Irminsul's inner workings and as a personal assistant of the God of Wisdom. On the other hand, the Fatui realizes that there is now an anomaly that is well outside of their control, but extensive knowledge about their inner workings of the Fatui business, though the Fatui could absolutely just leave him alone. A bad call, logistically, but honestly, the odds of Dottore believing Scaramouche is no threat if he already left him behind the first time is not zero. So what can we garner about the 10th? The problem with discussing the 10th Harbinger is what little we actually know. And if we were to talk about the difference between the 6th and the 10th Harbinger's removals, it's simple. We know what happened to the 6th Harbinger as an omniscient reader, but we have no idea what happened to the 10th to even begin deducing the differences. For all we know, the 10th seat could have probably still be alive and just hidden. Though there's no seat whatsoever and they just really don't like Tartaglia. But that's it for me today. I wanted to talk about the Irminsul because I wanted to dissect how fallacious human memory can be, and how there are some things I can bypass simply knowing what something is. Anyway, my name is Aster and thank you for chilling with me.